Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and for all of your support. I appreciate it so much. Today I wanted to go over color mixing because I have not made a video about this before and it has been highly requested. So I thought that you guys deserve this information first. So we're going to go through some color mixing examples, and I'm also going to go over a little bit of skin tone mixing. So stay tuned. It's not very hard once you get the basics. Once you know the basics of color mixing, you can pretty much create any color that you want. So it's pretty exciting. I hope that you guys enjoy. Let's dive right into it. To begin, we're going to be using the three primary colors, those being, of course, yellow, blue, and red. And these are going to be the foundation for pretty much all of our color mixes. There are different shades of these colors that you can use. I'm just using my brightest, most vibrant shades: alizarin, crimson, ultramarine, and gamboge hue. These three colors are the colors that you're going to want in your watercolor collection. Even if you would like to try more expensive watercolors, I highly recommend just getting the primary colors to begin with so that you're not wasting your money or spending too much on additional colors that you might not need. To begin here, I'm just going to swatch out these three primary colors so that you can see what they look like on paper. This is the alizarin crimson hue. You'll also notice as I go along that I'm rinsing my brush off and getting it nice and clean before I dip into another color. This next swatch is the ultramarine blue. And finally, the gamboge hue, which is a really bright yellow tone. I'll go over the different tones and shades of separate colors as we go, but for now, these are going to be the basic colors that we're going to use to create a whole variety of new colors. Now, you probably already know the basics of mixing colors, but we're just going to go through this one more time. So as you probably know, mixing red and blue is going to make purple. So in my palette here, I've just mixed together the red and the blue shade, and I'm just going to swatch the purple color right in between. I'm just going to clean my brush off again, and now I'm going to mix together some of the blue with the yellow, and back to primary school basics. Blue and yellow, of course, make green. So I'm just going to swatch that in between the two previous swatches. And you can see from these swatches that we've already gained 2 additional colors. So those are some examples of some of the brighter colors that you can get using the primary colors, but now I want to show you how to get neutrals such as browns and grays. To make brown, all you want to do is mix all 3 of the primary colors together. The different ratios of colors that you add to this mixture is going to dictate the final shade that you create. So for this one, I'm trying to add equal parts of red, blue, and yellow, and this is my final brown swatch. And now we can adjust that tone by adding in different ratios of the primary colors. So to this swatch, to make it a little bit of a cooler toned brown, I'm just going to add in more blue. Blue is a cool toned color and red is a warmer tone color. And the more that you add of each, it's going to sort of adjust the color that you're going to get. So with a lot of extra blue added here, I've kind of got more of a greeny, olivey brown color. It's definitely a brown with a cooler undertone. Now, if we do the opposite and we add more red directly to that brown shade, you're going to see that it's going to be a more burnt umber type color, definitely more red, more of a warm brown shade. So that's just an example of how you can warm up or cool down some of your neutrals. I'm also going to mix together the red and the yellow to make orange because I noticed that I hadn't done that above. And this is just going to take a little bit of adjusting. You can add more yellow to make more of a yellowy orange, or more red if you want it to be more of a bright reddish orange. So again, you can adjust the tone by just adding in more red or more yellow. So I just wanted to go over this one more time and just outline exactly what we did here. So first we took red and we took blue, and that made this lovely purple shade. And then we took blue and yellow, and that made this lovely sap green shade. Next, we mixed yellow with red, and we adjusted that slightly depending on the color of orange we wanted to get that nice mid-tone orange color. To create a neutral brown color, we took the red and the blue and the yellow to make this center brown shade. And then of course, to make the brown color warmer or cooler, we added more blue on the right and then more red on the left. Now I've just cleaned out a palette here to refresh my yellow. And I'm just going to create a couple of gradients to show you how mixing colors look on the paper as opposed to directly in the palette. So I'm just taking my yellow straight from the palette, and I'm going to start creating the top of a rectangle. I've washed my brush off completely, and I'm just going to dip into that red color. I want to make sure that it is nice and wet, and I'm just going to apply that directly below the yellow. What I'm trying to achieve here is a nice orange transition. This color sort of makes a peachy tone depending on how much red you actually do use, and this is also going to be a great mixture for skin tones, which I'll get into shortly as well. So in this example, you can see how the yellow and the red sort of blend together, and the colors look really nice blended together. In the next example, I'm going to show you what it looks like if we mix the yellow with one of the mixtures that we pre-mixed that were made with the primary colors, such as the purple shade. Because we've already mixed up the purple shade, because it's a mixture of the primary colors, it's going to sort of turn into this brown, muddy color. And that's basically happening because there's too many color mixtures going on here at the same time. If you remembered, when we made the brown, we mixed all of the primaries together at once. So when we're using a pre-mixed color of that red and blue, making purple, and then we're adding it to the yellow, that's 3 of our primary colors mixed together, and that's going to create a really muddy looking brown. So when you are mixing colors, to stay away from those muddy tones, try to think about the colors that make up the shade that you're using, and if it already contains the primary colors and you're mixing in another primary color, be very careful because you might end up with a really muddy looking shade. I'm just trying this gradient another way. I wanted to mix the colors directly on the paper, so I started with the red and then I added in the yellow, and I'm just going over the entire thing, mixing those colors together. And again, this is going to be a really nice kind of fleshy light pink color. It looks really nice again for skin tones. Now I'm going to rinse my brush off again, and then I'm going to create a different gradient, again just using 2 of the primary colors. So I'm taking my ultramarine blue, and then I'm just going to take some yellow, and as we experimented with above, you're going to get that nice green color. So I'm just going to keep mixing those together on the paper, and you'll see what happens. All right, let's move on to another trial here. I'm just going to take some of this paint out of my palette. I just wet the palette with my brush, and then I take a tissue and just rub that paint right out. I'm going to show you how you can adjust the tone by using more or less of different colors. So I'm starting with the green color that I mixed up, again using blue and yellow. And I'm just going to apply that to the paper here so that you can see our sort of neutral based green color. This actually resembles a sap green. It does have a bit more yellow in it, so it is kind of giving that golden tone. But if we wanted this color to be a little bit more golden in tone, all we have to do is add a little bit more yellow to this color. Doing that, we're going to achieve more of a green gold color. This is also a color that you can purchase, but once again, you don't have to. If you know how to mix these directly in your palette, you can save a ton of money. I'm just going to wipe that out of the palette and then show you another mixture. Using the same green color that we mixed up before, I'm just going to take that and add a little bit more blue this time to make sort of a more turquoisey green shade. This shade looks more like a hooker's dark green, so again, there's another color that we just created using only 2 colors. Now let's try this again using purple. So I've mixed up blue and red and just created this pretty basic purple shade here. And I'm just going to add in a little bit more red this time to make it more of a reddy purple. And again, you can adjust these as you go. If you find this is too red, go back and add in a little bit more of that original purple color or a touch of blue just to get it back to how it was. Now I'm going to add in more blue to make a really nice blue violet shade. And once again, there's a couple more colors that we just mixed using 3 basic colors to start. I'm just going to try it one more time using the blue. So here is my ultramarine blue. And I've actually just mixed in a little bit of the green. So we're mixing in a pre-mixed color. And that's going to create this really nice, deep sort of ocean turquoise shade. Super pretty. And the reason this works and doesn't turn muddy is because the green shade that we made before is created using only 2 primary colors, blue and yellow. And when we're adding that shade to blue, which is already one of the existing colors in the mixture, it's just going to create a more intense, different tone of that color. So it's not going to create like a muddy look. I've added a little bit of brown to this other one just to make a more olive, sort of bluey green shade. Now I want to talk to you guys about white. When you purchase white watercolor, you're basically purchasing it just for use as a mix. So this is Chinese white. I just like to call it my mixing white because really that's all that it's good for. It's not opaque, so it won't show up very well if you're trying to do splatters or different white, more opaque things on your piece. So when you buy white watercolor, it's just going to be used as a mixing agent. That's sort of the purpose of it all. So you can see here that I've added that to my red, and I've got this really pretty pink shade out of it. It is a little bit more opaque looking, but once it dries, it's just gonna look exactly like your standard transparent watercolor. I've added that as well to the blue shade that I had mixed up, and you can see that it's this really nice sort of lilac blue, almost periwinkle color. It makes things a lot more pastel, and it just helps to sort of add a tint to make it lighter. Mixing white is not something that I use regularly. It's definitely something that I'll use if I want a more pastel shade. Generally though, I try to just dilute the paint with more water, the lighter that I want it to appear. But the white is really helpful in obtaining some of those lighter tints that you wouldn't normally be able to get. I've added a little bit of the white to this orange mixture here, just to show you again that it can lighten shades. So when you are buying a white, just remember that the watercolor white is just going to be for mixing. And if you want something more opaque, something to do highlights on your pieces, I definitely recommend using a gouache, which is a more opaque type of paint, or you can also use acrylic paint, a white gel pen, a paint pen, those sort of things. But using a standard watercolor white is not going to be used for highlights. That's just not the purpose. Now I want to move on to mixing up skin tones. You'll see that the top swatches that I've created are basically used using some of the mixtures that I had previously mixed up. I've just added a little bit of the mixing white to it. But I wanted to create this part to introduce burnt umber to the mix. Burnt umber is a great base color for skin tones, especially darker skin tones. It's got a really warm undertone to it, but you can also sort of manipulate it to be cooler at the same time. So I've just swatched out the basic burnt umber. I'm just gonna add a little bit more ultramarine blue to my palette, and I'm going to show you what happens when we mix together the brown with the blue. This is a really great way also to make a nice black color. So you're going to basically have your brown, which as we learned previously is just a mixture of all of the primary colors, and then adding more blue to that is going to make it darker, but it's going to make it have a cool undertone. So this color is a great shade for shadows and darker areas on skin. And you can also layer these colors. So I'm just going to create sort of a orange based base using a little bit of the brown and some yellow and some red. I'm going to apply that first to the paper. And while that is wet, I'm going to drop in some of that dark color that we mixed up previously, and that's just going to give it more of a golden undertone. Now look what happens when we add some of that white into the color that we mixed up, that brownish gray color. It's going to make it a really light gray. This can also be a really nice shade for doing shadow detail on lighter skin tones. And again, you can adjust it a little bit more by adding in a little bit of red to make it warmer, or yellow or even blue to make it a little bit cooler. Now let's make a really deep brown using the colors that we've already mixed up. So I've added some blue to this gray mixture, so that it has that cooler undertone, but then I've also added in a little bit of red to warm it up just a little bit. And then I'm going into my burnt umber and I'm adding that to the mixture, and you can see from this swatch, right, or this color in my palette, that it's definitely a lot more almost chocolatey looking when I apply it. And because of that red undertone, it's got a really warm tone to it. So what happens when we take a different color of yellow? I'm taking Naples yellow right now, which is sort of a more light pastel shade of yellow. It's definitely got more of a white base to it. And I'm just gonna mix that with a little bit of the red, alizarin crimson, and I'm gonna try to create lighter skin tones. And you can definitely adjust these as you go. I've just created a swatch here. It's definitely more of an orangey flesh tone, so I'm just gonna work on adjusting that a little bit more. I definitely want this color to be a little bit cooler, so less of a bright orangey, so I've added in a little bit of blue. You can see as I'm mixing, it's sort of making a greenish shade, and that's not exactly what I want. So I'm gonna pull it back a little bit, just with a little bit more red. And the result is going to be a nice peachy flesh tone, as opposed to that more orange tinted flesh tone. This, because it has a little bit more of a cooler undertone, it's definitely more realistic skin tone looking. So now that we've got a couple skin tones, we can adjust the lightness and the darkness of those simply by adding more pigment or more water. So in this case, I wanted it to be even lighter, so I'm just adding in more water, and that's gonna create a really nice light flesh tone. To cool that down a little bit and make it a little bit more gray in some areas, this could be used for light shadow areas on, say, a face or something with a very light-skinned person. Just add a little bit more blue and you'll get that nice cool undertone. So those are some of the basics of color mixing. There is a lot more to this, but I hope that this tutorial helped you guys out. I hope that you kind of get the idea of mixing warms and cools, and I hope to see you in the next one.